Okay, the College Football 25 Dynasty Deep Dive is officially here, and I guess I am officially back. I know it's been a month since I've uploaded. I apologize for that. You guys know I'm not big on sharing a ton of personal details on the channel, so let's just say I wasn't in the best mood to record, and that's all I'm going to say about it. But I should be back now, and this should be a very hectic week. There's a lot going on, and even though I did play College Football 25 early, you guys probably know that already if you've been a fan of the channel, and I will say, we didn't really get to play Dynasty. We really only had Play Now down in Orlando at EA Studios. However, I will say that, how do I want to word this? Some of us may or may not have snuck into Dynasty. Now, I can't say any names, and I can't confirm or deny whether that's true or not. I feel like OJ, if I did it, if we were to sneak into Dynasty, we probably just would have backed out of Play Now and go into Dynasty. It wouldn't have been all that difficult. But let's go ahead and talk about the Dynasty Deep Dive trailer. Love Chad Walker. Ben Hallmiller is super, super passionate about this. I'm really, really excited. I think the best possible team is working on this stuff over at EA. I really think you guys are going to be ecstatic about not only what's going to be in this Dynasty Deep Dive trailer, which I have not seen yet, but also what is in this absolutely monumental 86-page deep dive. I got sent this deep dive a day or two ago. 86 pages in Google Docs. So there's a lot of info in here. We're going to be covering it as succinctly as possible. And even though I've already had presentations on all this stuff, I have not had this level of detail prior to actually receiving the deep dive. So let's go ahead and talk about it and watch this trailer. All right.
Football 25 back for another deep dive.
We know it's all
this
about
time
Dynasty.
We're talking about everyone's favorite mode, Dynasty.
Absolutely.
Online Dynasty in College Football 25 can accommodate up to 32 teams, and you can play with friends for up to 30 seasons.
I know some people are kind of bummed out about only 30 seasons. Come on, guys. Even if it takes you 10 years to build up your program, you have 20 more seasons of dominance. I don't know. It seems like there are other things you can worry about. That, to me, probably isn't one of them. You get to 30 seasons, it's probably time to restart anyway. So that's just kind of where I stand on that. I think there are other things you can worry about. I don't really think that is one of them.
The new 12-team college football.
12-team playoff. Of course, this was going to be in the game. You know, I think we are going to see more blowouts. It just kind of seems inevitable with, you know, some of the top teams in the country playing just teams that squeak in. There are really only a few elite teams every year. So if you're the 11 or 12 seed, it's going to be a tough road to the national championship. We'll just say that. But
playoff.
Not impossible.
Recruiting.
I'm gonna pause a lot because these are a lot of new images, right? Actually, maybe we'll just go over it more in the actual blog. But, you know, you can see the big thing for me about recruiting is I really wish it was edge or just defensive end as opposed to specific positions here, like right outside linebacker. We don't know whether he is an edge rusher or an off-ball player. Now, we can kind of glean that from the actual attributes. However, it would be a nice quality of life thing if we could actually just instantly differentiate what type of a player they were. Now, again, you can use context clues to figure it out. A 6'5", 240-pound recruit is unlikely to be an off-ball player at this level. But I wonder, I don't think recruits can gain weight the way they do in real life, so they'd probably just come in around, 250-plus pounds if they were playing off the edge. But whatever.
The transfer portal. And a ton of customization.
Had to have the transfer portal, obviously. It's a major part of college football now.
College football has seen seismic changes over the past few years.
Absolutely.
And in EA Sports College Football 25, you can experience this new landscape while building your program the way you want. The 2024 season marks the debut of the new 12-team college football playoff, and you can play it first in the game months before the real thing. You could be the first coach to lead your school through the new 12-team playoff and hoist.
I will say the game just does look incredible. I prefer the way it looks to Madden. I don't know, maybe it's more cartoony, but I just like the way it looks.
Unlimited transfers, managing your dynasty roster has never been
Luis
more
Lucky.
important. Evaluate your needs and opportunities for talent upgrades at the start of each season. The best way to build a powerhouse is to recruit through the high school ranks. So let's fill up.
That's kind of the interesting thing about college football as opposed to the pros is if you have better players, better, like more talented athletes, you probably just will win most of your games. Recruiting is the lifeblood of any program. They had to get this right. And I will tell you, it is, and I'm going to have a tutorial on this next week, but I'll tell you, there's a lot to do. I don't know if I would say it's too tedious. I think it looks like there's more than there actually is. We'll talk about this more as we go, but there is a lot to take in. It might take you a minute to adapt to the new recruiting. I think it's kind of a combination of a lot of the NCAAs if you had played those previously. NCAA 13 comes to mind for some of these things, but I think they've kind of like made it a little bit less tedious to accomplish what you want, but it is still fairly involved.
Each year, over 3,500 high school recruits are generated from all over the country, with certain regions representing real-world.
You can see the different committing stage as well. You can obviously see where your interest is, and this is kind of a new change. Is if you were on Twitter at all, you follow any of the On3 guys, even though they're not recruiting or committing yet, you will have guys just drop their top 8 schools. So I wonder if that's going to make it so where if you are not in their top 8, if you're just eliminated, because we have seen it before where recruits drop a top 4 or top 5 and then they commit to a school that is outside of that top 4 or 5. So it'll be interesting to see what the actual parameters are.
Blue chip talent like South Florida and Metro Atlanta. Do research to find.
That's also a really, really cool change that they've made instead of just doing the state. I don't think anyone would have complained if just Florida was the pipeline state for, whatever your school happens to be. But the fact that there are different regions, if it's a real hotbed of producing talent, the fact that you have Metro Atlanta and South Florida, and I'm assuming, the Metroplex DFW as well. So
find recruits that best fit
should be pretty interesting.
And determine who you can realistically
this is from
land.
Irvington, New Jersey.
A recruit's
Tough kid.
interest in your school is decided by 14 different pitch grades like proximity to home, playing time, and brand.
So all these different icons on the left will correlate to their motivations on the right side, and you will pitch them based on what their interests are. So you're probably not going to say, hey, we have a great academic prestige of our school. You can get a degree, and it's very highly sought after to get a degree from the school. He doesn't care. He's not here to play school. He's here to play football. So you would, pitch him on brand exposure and winning a championship and being a winning program with your coach in the past.
Brand exposure. So you'll need to discover how your program's pitch grades align with your recruits' desires, in addition to scouting for talent. Some players have a deal breaker requirement, and if your program cannot provide, the recruit will lock you out. Deal breakers also drive a player.
I do expect, though, that they'll have a lock breaker type feature, but I don't know if that's going to be able to break a lock if they have a deal breaker. So that'll be interesting to see how much you can actually upgrade your coach. Again, that's going to be pretty involved as well.
Decision to enter the transfer portal. Monitor at-risk players and get
but that's college football, right?
Convince your favorites to stay. Track your recruits as they narrow down their top schools. Pitch a prospect to gain more interest, and then set up school visits when the timing is right. It's crucial to remain in their top 10.
So one of the things that they showed us with setting up visits, for example, is, you can have high risk, high reward, or you can have high risk, low reward. Let's say you're Alabama, for example, and you're playing an FCS school like FCS West, the Royals in College Football 25. If you win, they'll be like, all right, you beat an FCS school, whatever. But if you lose, oh my goodness, they're going to be like, there's no shot I'm coming to your school. That's a thing that can happen in College Football 25. So you got to be careful.
5 to finally be part of their top 3. As a recruit trims down to the top 8, you can attempt to increase your appeal. If your school doesn't have exactly what the prospect is looking for, you can try to sway their opinion in your favor. Plan visits that elevate a recruit's experience, like pairing a quarterback visit with a wide receiver visit at the same time.
We know about complimentary and competitive visits from NCAA 14.
To keep an eye on the transfer portal when it opens in the offseason to round out your roster with talent you couldn't land from recruiting. Add portal prospects to your board just like you would.
You know kind of how like the transfer portal works if you followed college football. It's kind of like a Band-Aid. It's an instant fix as opposed to a development. So if you can't really have a tight end that's ready to go, you might be able to steal one from the transfer portal and get someone that can be an instant starter for a short amount of time.
With recruiting, but expect quick decisions as transfers have a shorter timeline to land a new home.
Makes sense.
Conference realignment is a hot topic in college football.
It's ridiculous, really.
Custom conferences in
Cal and Stanford are in the ACC.
25, Dynasty is yours to control.
But
See
you needed
what a
this,
20-team
obviously.
Super conference might look like.
The Pac-12.
Or
It's
revert
two
to the
teams.
Traditional conference alignment. Shape the conference size and membership and set custom conference rules. Set up divisions and more.
All had to be in. Had to be in
Once
the
you've
game.
settled your conference options, it's time to select your team. Begin with a highly ranked team and dominate at the top with repeat recruiting and playoff success. Or build from the ground up with a smaller program.
That's the way to do it.
You have what it takes to go from an unknown
Kennesaw State's going to be
favorite.
a really good choice,
We
I think.
can't talk
I had them
about
in my
your
video of top 10
without
Dynasty teams.
talking about your starting job. Start as an offensive or defensive
Coach
coordinator.
Carousel, again, had to be in the game. This was going to be a massive, massive thing. This is the way a lot of people play. Because then you don't have to have, I get the head coach job immediately. I can control the entire offense or the entire defense and build up until I earn the head coach job
and climb
and
the
get
ranks
different
to
jobs
head
and things like
coach.
that.
Or take over a program as the head coach.
But you can
right
also
away.
take over as head coach right away.
Choose from one of the 3 base coaching types to start.
This is
Your
pretty
coach
involved.
type will determine what coaching
There are
skill trees you
huge
start
ability
with.
trees, and they really
From there,
get
the
super extensive.
Abilities
But
you acquire
that's good.
as you
A lot of
progress will
replayability, I
determine
would say.
What kind of coach
But
you
there is a
develop
lot
into.
here.
Unlock additional skill trees with better abilities. Or, if you build up multiple skill trees, you can unlock hybrid trees that leverage a more diverse skill set. The coaching carousel is an important part of every coach's journey. Whether you're the head man at your dream school or working your way up, the carousel is your way of fielding offers from other programs. Head coaches in Dynasty can actively manage their coordinator position.
This is a nice change. It was a little bit different in the past with the talents, but now you can fire and hire. So you still, in NCAA 14, for example, you could customize their abilities, but you couldn't hire or fire. You just got them. This is a little bit different now.
So if one
You
of
can
your
actually
staff
fire now.
takes a job elsewhere, or you decide to cut ties for other reasons, you can use the carousel to replace them. Remember, even the greatest coaches need support, and every coach has a unique skill tree. It's important to think about how you want to build your staff, whether that's doubling down on your existing strengths to max out your benefits or seeking out balance for a well-rounded staff. Choose wisely. The decisions you make here will matter to your program's success and your coach's progression. The benefits of coach talents are stackable. So if your head coach and defensive coordinator have the same ability, the impact for that ability will be greater.
Which is the way it probably should
Well,
be,
that's
right?
it for today's deep dive into
But
Dynasty
a lot
mode.
of really cool information. I'm going to touch on a lot of this, but we're not going to read verbatim. We're just going to hit on the big things in each category, and let's go ahead and jump into it. Also, apologies if you could hear the cat screaming in the background. I was in New York for a week and back home in New Jersey, so she wants attention, but daddy's working. So we kind of hit on building your coach already, but there are a lot of different progression features you can see here. Like reaching different goals will get you XP. So of course, with the draft, every recruit is probably going to want to end up going into the NFL, right? So that's going to be a big feature. Pro draft goals based on which round your player is drafted in. For example, player drafted in the first round could be a more significant boost than somebody maybe drafted further down the board. So that's going to be a big part, maybe even the biggest part of Dynasty, is upgrading your coach so that it makes it easier to reel in top talent. But because there are so many different abilities and so many different things with these coaches, it takes a significant amount of time in order to do any of those things. So selecting your backstory is going to be pretty important here. With Motivator, you get your players to play their best by boosting their ratings and composure. Jim Harbaugh, nobody has it better than us, right? This is going to get your players to play at their top ability. Recruiter is going to be able to get in, obviously, better players to your school, top talent that's better right away, but maybe they won't be able to hit their stride. However, that's where the hybrid elements come in, where you can kind of take from everything as you build out your tree. And then Tactician boosts your players' ratings exclusively on game day. So you scheme up big plays, let the visor fly. That's an interesting expression. But yeah, so Motivator is overall boost, where Tactician's going to be, still kind of the same idea with game day. Recruiter is probably going to be where I land. I like to get that top talent and really bring in the best players that can help us win. Now, the interesting thing about some of these different abilities is there are different levels, from bronze all the way up, right? But you can see here, I'll just call it that for now. Master Motivator, you can't just get that. You need to have the requirements unlocked in order to be able to spend your coach points. So right now, this coach only has 3. Master Motivator is 15. However, we can't even unlock that yet because we already have to spend 50 total points in the Motivator section to begin with. Now, you can see that you have 5 players drafted category has already been achieved. So you could be able to do this once you spend the requisite number of points overall. And each of these upgrades is going to have different unlock requirements that you need to be able to hit in order to actually buy that, which is good. It's not necessarily instant gratification. You have things that you have to actually work towards and goals to meet before you can do these different things, which makes sense. Of course, Recruiter here. A lot of these abilities are going to be really nice. Running backs take less time to fully scout, and this is going to be individual, recruiting advantages for different positions. This is for the running game. As you can imagine, there's going to be also for passers, I'll just say quarterbacks, receivers, offensive and defensive linemen, all the way throughout the team. Even specialists, it looks like, with the field goalpost icon there. And then coordinators, same type of deal. You have the same set of abilities and archetypes available, and you can upgrade those as you see fit. And you can see how it fits with your entire staff here as well. So once you unlock Master Motivator, for example, you can get anyone to run through a brick wall. The biggest XP gain whenever a player levels up. So individual players will have levels that upgrade them as well. And of course, not going to spend too much time talking about climbing the coaching ladder. I think you know how it kind of works. As you get better and more successful, you're going to get better and bigger opportunities. So if you start as the offensive coordinator at Memphis, maybe eventually you can find yourself as the head coach of Alabama, kind of the default big-time school that I use just because they've been so big for so long, and have now recently had some coaching staff turnover with the retirement of the great Nick Saban. So you can see different graphics in here, different opportunities potentially arising. And you can see it's not just guys being fired or hired, but they can also go to the NFL or retire in the case of, like a Nick Saban, right? Or whoever you want to choose. Of course, you will also have, some of those options as well. You can also be fired if things don't go well. And you can hire guys, which is kind of nice. So it makes you feel like you have more control now. And of course, when you go to hire a coach, you'll have options of different guys to choose from. However, I don't believe there's too much of a negotiation period. I know it says offer pending, but I can't imagine you're going to have a difficult time, hiring whoever you want. We'll have to see when the actual game comes out, right? But we shall see. Now, maybe the most important thing, staged recruiting. I say the most important thing about a lot of these things, but a lot of them go hand in hand and they tie in together. So These are built around 3 distinct phases: discovery, pitch, and close. So you find the guy, you tell them why they should come to your school, and then you seal the deal and actually get them to commit to your program and get them on campus for the next season. So, of course, it begins with discovery. You'll find new prospects to target. You'll see what their skills are, what their interests are, what they care about, and then you'll be able to make your pitch to them after you've made the cut already into their top 5. So during the pitch phase, you're selling that individual recruit on your program, what you have to offer, and how well your school aligns with their motivations, and you'll see whether or not they're going to be a good fit at your school. It's going to be very difficult to get players that don't want to be there. If they're not going to be a good fit, it's going to be unlikely they will end up choosing you. So, of course, there are different things that they're going to be interested in. Playing time, playing style. So, if you're a big run-heavy school, it might be more difficult to get a quarterback that wants to go air raid, for example. Whether you're a championship contender, a lot of these things we've seen in NCAA 14, for example, program tradition, campus lifestyle, stadium atmosphere, whether or not they can go pro, brand exposure, academic and conference, and coach prestige, coach stability. So this is actually kind of an interesting one. It'll measure how long the coaching staff has been in place and how likely they are to stay in place rather than taking a job elsewhere. And maybe you got promoted from an offensive coordinator job somewhere, you're a new head coach. Maybe that guy doesn't want to go to your school because you haven't been there for long enough. So that's something interesting to think about. And then, of course, athletic facilities and whether or not it's close to home. Each grade has a unique set of grading criteria. For example, playing time is graded on a per-player basis. The player's overall or projected overall if they're a recruit, which is also interesting. Projected overall, as opposed to knowing what it is compared to the team's roster to project how many years it will take for them to become a starter. Some guys are not going to want to sit around, right? And you can see here, different things that your school has to offer. Of course, Stanford, one of the best schools of the major football programs and even otherwise. Stanford is a hugely awesome academic school. You can see a lot of these top options, with the highest grade. It's not surprising to see Rice and Northwestern and Cal Berkeley and UCLA and Duke up here. Those are some smart people schools. And then, of course, Georgia Tech, Notre Dame. None of these are particularly surprising. You might not see Coastal Carolina up here. Just one of those things, right? However, a lot of these schools may not be championship contenders, and therefore you're going to take a hit in that regard. If a player that you're recruiting wants both of those things, maybe a little bit more difficult for you to land that player. But if you already meet one of the criteria, you're already ahead of the game. But of course, not going to talk about this way too long. You guys know how it works. It's going to be the same deal for all of the different things. It just depends on what that individual recruit cares about. Recruiting pipelines has changed in a big way. Now, as you can see here, which is very interesting, a school's pipeline net level will never change, which ensures that schools who are historically strong recruiters in a given region will always have an advantage. For example, Florida has historically dominated recruiting in Central Florida in areas like Lakeland, Tampa, Orlando. LSU regularly reaches into East Texas and along the entire Gulf Coast. So those schools are going to stay good at recruiting those individual regions. It should always be a challenge to take top-tier recruits from those schools that have historically dominated in those regions. I would love for the Longhorns to start recruiting better in East Texas. That would be sick. It's happened a little bit lately, and they've actually, reached into Louisiana and things. But yeah, obviously, it's not really a conversation for today. And now, of course, in your recruiting update, you can see all these different levels, whether you have a commit, whether a recruit has decided on their top 3 or top 5 or top 8, or whether they've recruited to or committed to a different school. So there's a lot here, but it's pretty straightforward. You can see everything right away. You can get your school update if things have changed along those lines, your Coach XP goals for the upcoming week. And of course, for stage 1, we talked about discovery, and then it's pitch. It's going to be a lot of different things where you find out about kind of the base interests and then, how much of a chance you're actually going to have to get that player. Of course, you're able to see your team needs section as well. You can see where your little bit weak right now. You can see who you're targeting versus who is signed, who has committed. Committed ends up being signed, right? So team needs going to be pretty important. Check this out, see where you actually need to upgrade. But here is another big thing with recruiting. So recruiting hours, and I'm going to read this word for word because it's really important, are your core currency to spend on recruiting actions and scouting each week. The amount of recruiting hours you have depends on your team prestige and what part of the season you're in. It's going to be different from the start of the season to the end of the season, right? Teams with a higher team prestige will have more recruiting hours each week. Going to be easier to get top-tier recruits if you're at Ohio State versus, say, I'm Houston State, right? This is meant to model the recruiting resources a program has, with higher tier programs having significantly more resources available to them. For example, in the preseason, a 5-star program will have 1,000 recruiting hours compared to only 350 for a 1-star program, and it will scale up, 2, 3, 4 stars. The time of the year also impacts your recruiting hours. During the preseason and in off-season recruiting, you do not have to prepare for a game each Saturday. As a result, you have significantly more time to spend on recruiting than you do in the heart of the regular season. In addition to the maximum recruiting hours you can spend in a week, each prospect has a maximum number of hours that you can spend on them in a given week. The default max is 50 hours, but this can be increased to a maximum of 70 with the always be recruiting ability for that position. The recruiting board is just where you're seeing everything, right? Camden, New Jersey, another tough kid. A lot of New Jersey representation here. Gotta love it. But, you can, of course, reorder this and see exactly where a recruit happens to lie in terms of interest. In the scouting period, you don't really know anything. But you can use recruiting hours to scout a player further. Of course, spend hours to learn more about the prospect's ratings, abilities, and mentals. Those are some new things to the college football video game that were very different from College Football 25. And I actually do like abilities for offline. I think it makes the better players feel better and more unique. I don't really know how it impacts online. I don't really care, to be honest. I'm an offline guy. That's just me. Selfishly, I only care about what I care about, shockingly. So, of course, you start to figure out just where they fall on the scale, but you can also get the exact numbers the more you continue to scout a player. And then when you get the max scouted, you're going to find out whether or not they have any abilities and what their mentals are and the grades for them, right? But of course, we zoom in here, the development trait. This trait can be learned early by purchasing the mind reader ability in the strategist archetype, which I read that out loud, but that's what that says there. So you need abilities, you need to upgrade your coach to find out the max amount about a player. It takes a long time, but once you have them scouted at 100%, you of course get all attributes, abilities, and mentals, but the dev trait is an entirely different ballgame. So 4 states of scouting: unscouted, partially scouted, mostly scouted, and fully scouted will give you each different level here. So for partially scouted, early on, a gold bar will appear, and in that gold zone, it covers 25% of the bar space. The player's true rating for that attribute is somewhere in the range. So if you have the gold bar from 80 to 99, could be an 80, could be a 99, obviously, you won't know until you continue to scout that player, which of course is probably the way to do it. You shouldn't know instantly, and if you in NCAA 14 had maxed out abilities, you could find out instantly. Now, you will, of course, when you upgrade your coach, be able to find out more quickly than a coach without that higher upgrade, without those higher levels, but it's still not going to be instantaneous, right? So it will scale up the more you go, the more points you have, and that's, the incentive to level up your coach. So you have 5 recruiting actions. Offer scholarship will show the prospect you are extremely interested. As a result, you will gain a small weekly influence boost with the prospect after offering them a scholarship. Additionally, you will not be able to bring them on campus for an official visit or receive a commitment from a prospect until you've offered them. Searching social media is also an opportunity to learn more about that player. You get a small amount of influence, each week when they see you've liked their story. But be careful not to like an image from 3 years ago. I don't think that's a possibility. That's just a fun joke, I would say. DM the player. You can slide in their DMs. That feels a little bit weird, but you can give them another small influence. Contacting friends and family will give you a significant amount of influence, if you're talking to grandma. And then send the house is the max amount that you can do. From the recruiting coordinator to every coach in your staff, send every available resource you have after a prospect to gain as much influence as possible. So if you really, really want that player, you can spend a ton of hours to really sell them on your school. So that's going to be the move for the 5 stars. Send the house, really show you're interested, and make them a priority. And you can see the different things here. They cost different things. Of course, sending the house is going to be significantly more expensive than just a preliminary search on social media. And then we kind of talked about the pitch already. Of course, that costs a lot more hours, 20 on the soft sell, 40 on the hard sell, and you can also sway them as well if things aren't necessarily going your way. And then you can pitch based on what their actual interests are. We kind of talked about that earlier. And then the close, of course, this is absolutely massive because you can schedule visits. You can see basically the UGF Pandas here from Drew FCS Southeast, and you can schedule a recruit to come watch your team play a game. And of course, you're going to have a bigger impact. You have no real bonus for a win here against an FCS school, but a massive decrease if you lose. Whereas if you play a rivalry game, you have a significantly bigger boost if you win than an FCS school, but because it's a big rivalry game with a lower tier opponent, which kind of disrespectful, Auburn to Alabama, but you have a massive loss if you lose. So you cannot lose those games. There is a risk for getting that recruit on campus. You can seal the deal or ruin your chances entirely. But of course, hopefully it ends up in that player being committed. And then with the transfer portal, just one of those things, whether or not they want to go to the draft, maybe they don't fit with the play style or playing time, they might want to leave. Now, of course, similarly to NCAA 14, you will have a persuasion chance. High persuasion chance, of course, means actually good likelihood of that player coming back, whereas, hard is going to make it pretty impossible for that player to want to come back. But it is a thing that could happen. Of course, then in the transfer portal, you can see different guys. It's the same type of recruiting pitch for these guys. You want to get in early and try to steal some of these players out of the transfer portal. Of course, following signing day, you can make position changes. You can check out player progression. And now this is interesting. In college football, the offseason is the most impactful time period when it comes to player development. While players can improve throughout the season, the bulk of their progression and development happens during the spring and the summer. Every season we see players who put in the work during the offseason come back bigger, stronger, faster, and overall a significantly better player. Player progression in college football 25 is no different. In Dynasty, players will automatically progress their attributes and physical abilities. Mental abilities cannot be upgraded, allowing for greater differentiation between players. Those mental abilities out of the high school recruiting classes are going to be very, very important. You can also see the different development traits in here. Normal is basically slow. Don't want it. Impact. This can be a big-time player, right? They can be someone that has starter upside. Star is this guy could be an NFL-type guy. They're going to be one of the best players on your team. And then elite is these are the first round type of players that can really be the backbone of your program. That cannot miss guys. That you don't want to lose them. If they get injured, you're in rough shape. And of course, you have different skill groups as well. We talked about some of this in the initial trailer, but you have a bunch of different abilities. You can have a max of, I believe, 3 mentals and then 5 physicals, and you have different levels on each. So bronze, silver, gold, up to platinum. And then, yeah, we saw it in the gameplay deep dive. But the mentals are going to be extremely valuable. Those cannot be upgraded. The physicals can be upgraded over time. So that's kind of an interesting thing. And of course, there are a lot of different abilities that will really change the way a player plays. With the impact players, you'll have, of course, the star logo underneath them. And then we know about managing wear and tear from the gameplay deep dive, but it's going to be something to really keep an eye on over the course of a season. You might want to limit touches in certain games for your star players. If you're playing an FCS school, you might not want to keep in the starters if you're blowing out a team to try and keep them healthy for the rest of the season. That's going to be something to keep an eye on. We know about the 12-team playoff. The rankings, I'm sure, is going to be differently weighted based on conference, based on record, based on strength of schedule. And then once the rankings are set, the bracket will be seeded. So the new 12-team format is a 5+7 model. 5 highest-ranked conference champions automatically in, and then the remaining 7 spots will be based on the order of the final college football playoff ranking. The only way to get a first-round bye is to be one of the 4 highest-ranked conference champions. So an undefeated Notre Dame or any other independent, as well as the winner of the Pac-12, can be seeded no higher than 5th and will never be eligible to skip the playoff first round. It's really important. You want to be in those top-tier conferences, and we saw it in the 14 playoff this past year. Florida State, deemed to play in a lesser conference than the SEC. They didn't get in as a result. Whether you're for that or against that, that's ultimately what ended up happening. So I know the ACC is still one of the Power 5, right? Or I guess Power 4 now at the Pac-12 dissolving. But the big difference from the SEC compared to some of these other conferences, of course, you can kind of change around different conferences as you choose. You can throw Florida State into the Big Ten if that's what you so choose to do. You can do whatever you want. And then, of course, you can customize schedules as well. That's an interesting thing. You can totally have a ton of flexibility outside of locked rivals, of course, which makes sense. You can't have Texas and then take Oklahoma off the schedule, for example. That's always going to be a locked rival, and that's the same case with every single rival for every single school, right? If it's a locked matchup every year, it will stay that way. But you can schedule the UGF Pandas, FCS Southeast Pandas, if you want. But there are certain matchups, conference matchups, that are locked. Team Builder is back. You can import up to 16 Team Builder teams in a private online dynasty. Is it going to work offline? I don't think so. I think it's got to be online. You got to have an internet connection to do it. However, you don't have to play anybody online. It can be an online dynasty with just you. I don't know what the logistics are that they couldn't get it into offline. I'm not really sure. But, I mean, most everybody with a console is going to have internet connection with their console hooked up. So, shouldn't be really too big of a deal. I know some people can't have internet connection, but do have, their console hooked up. So that's just one of those things. It's unfortunate, but it is what it is. Hives and Watch, we kind of know about that, but that's pretty much it. Of course, this is cool. You can gain stickers for your players. Ohio State, Florida State, different schools that use different stickers to kind of indicate, how well they're playing. It's an earned thing. So, of course, if you play well during the season, you can get more stickers on your helmet. So, kind of a cool thing. And that's pretty much it for now. I try to be as succinct as possible, and I'm looking forward to playing this game. I'm looking forward to making content, and I hope you guys are looking forward to watching it. Thanks so much for watching. I'll see you in the next one. Take it easy.